Please help me welcome Dr. J.R. Paulson and his lecture this morning, Protecting the Night Sky.
Right. Sound okay in the back? Okay, great. Well, let's get rolling. Dark skies, saving a precious natural resource. It's about light pollution. I think we can all identify light pollution when we see it. Agree? The definition of pollution is the introduction of contaminants into the natural environment that causes adverse change. The third grader's definition: to make the environment dirty. Yeah, they get the idea. Or unclean is known as pollution. Another elementary school person says it's a big problem. It affects our life very badly. And this boy or girl said that there are 3 types of pollution. And actually, there be many types. So as introduction in this, we immediately recognize this pollution, air pollution, when we see it or smell it. This is Shanghai and some of the skyscrapers towering above Shanghai. Solid waste is a form of pollution by definition of the kids or whatever it is. Stuff being where it ain't supposed to be. This is a Baranga River in Bangladesh. How'd you like to be swimming in that like these kids are? This is the Arbor Lake Spillway in Grinnell. Image courtesy of Barb Briggs. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch Vortex. Not Puerto Rico. Oh, some of you got the inside joke there. Good. We're all familiar with oil spills. Industrial runoff. Do chemicals always go where they are intended? These are eggshell cracks from DDT spray for mosquitoes in the 40s and 50s. Some of you are old enough to remember that. It led to dramatic decline in birds. Noise pollution. What about toxic algae blooms, in part caused by agricultural and industrial runoffs? And algae blooms can be harmful in many ways. This is the dead zone in the Chesapeake Bay. Pretty dramatic boundary there. This is an algae bloom, again, in Arbor Lake. What about microplastics? I wanted to do this introduction to be sure I got this in. So we're all aware now about microplastics and they're in the environment. Yes, it's easy to see what plastics are doing to this fish. They dissect it and you can see all the plastic things in its stomach. But what are they doing to you? Some people say that they're not really worried about this new kind of pollution, and it's just not really a big deal, and it's overhyped. But we eat, drink, and breathe microplastics. And you can see from this slide that a lot of it's from bottled water. It's in beer, air, tap water, seafood. Well, guess what? It could also already be in your arteries, in your carotid arteries, your aorta, or your coronary arteries. Recent article in New England Journal of Medicine this last March is finding microplastics in our vascular system. Basically, this was a study where Dave Koster and I did the first carotid endarterectomy in Grinnell many years ago. And it's really a neat surgery. You open the artery and you take out this kind of long worm-like thing about yay long, and then you sew the artery up. You send it to pathology and they say, yeah, it's a plaque in there. Well, these guys at a big university place said, well, let's look for microplastics in these plaques that come down to the lab. And they found some interesting findings. And they found that about half of the people, they did about 100, and half of them had microplastics in their plaques. And the other half didn't, just random. Well, they said, okay, that's kind of scary and interesting. You're not supposed to have plastic in your blood vessels in the plaques, but they did. And then they said, well, okay, does that make a difference? Well, the conclusion is, yeah, they followed up for 34 months, and they found out they measured heart attack, stroke, and death, all pretty easy things to measure. And guess what? Major increase in those results in the people that already had the microplastics in them compared to the people that didn't. So it's in our bodies now. How much, we don't know. But this is going to be a big thing of pollution in the future. But I just wanted to throw that in there because I think it's significant. What about light pollution? Is it really something we should be concerned or care about? Yes, the sky is lit up at night more than it used to be. But is that really a problem? Yes, we can't see many of the stars in the Milky Way at night, but can't we just drive to a darker location? Like Jack said, we could see it from his old house where he lived, and then he comes into town and can't see it. Well, if you want to see it, you got to drive out of town. This is mainly just a problem for amateur and professional astronomers like Bob Cadmus and me. So a lot of people think it is. Well, National Geographic cover, The End of Night, Why We Need Darkness. And that, of course, is the theme for this presentation. What's wrong with this otherwise beautiful picture? What's not natural and what doesn't belong in that picture? Light pollution from LA. And you can see the scattering. It's the glow from the large city can obscure the view of the stars for over 200 kilometers away. This is the northeast coast of the United States, with some of the cities marked. A view from space really shows a problem. If you live east of the Mississippi River, chances are high that you will never see the Milky Way unless you drive a long ways away from your local city. And this is a composite. You can't get all of the Earth dark at the same time, but you can take pictures of different parts and put it together. But this is what the Earth would look like from space. It does look like, not would look. I don't know about you, but just sitting at that and gawking is like, wow. What you can see in the United States, the eastern half, India, Africa, Amazon jungle, etc. Our ancestors could look up at the Milky Way, our galaxy, as a large band of white light stretching across the sky. But because of light pollution, it's no longer the case. So one study thought about 60% of Europeans and 80% of Americans have never seen it at all. Light pollution comes from artificial lights that shine upward and create a sky glow. And it's increasing by about 10% a year. Fortunately, just as with other forms of pollution, scientists are learning more and more about the many effects of artificial light at night. And we use the acronym ALAN, A-L-A-N, artificial light at night. And I'm going to refer to that acronym at different times in the case. Now, what is light pollution? It's glare, sky glow, light trespass, clutter. And more than 80% of the world's population lives under some form of light-polluted sky. What are the consequences? Wasted energy, light trespass, glare, ecological disturbances in the environment. Sky glow and review of the night sky is obscured. Now I'll discuss these starting with sky glow. Now this is a busy slide, has a lot of information, but it compares the brightness of light from natural sources, the sun, and you can see on the scale of brightness on the left, when the sun goes down, and the moon, and compares how how much light there is from outdoor lighting and sky glow and the elevation of the sun and the moon. And I'll come back to this in a minute. Starlight actually causes the significant amount of light, not from the sun or the moon, but stars themselves. This is a good pictorial view of the continuum from the inner city to dark skies and what it would kind of look like, as you can see in there. Now, Linda and I went to the Nebraska Star Party many years ago, and we were impressed that we were hiking around with all these other people with their telescopes and tents set up, and, well, how are we going to see? How are we going to see? It's so dark out here. Well, guess what, folks? It was not dark. It was light. You could see it. Remember, Linda? See it around, walking all over. But it was the light from the stars in the Milky Way and the galaxy that produced enough light, natural light, that you could see. That's what a real dark sky sight is like. Now, how do you measure it? The Bortle scale is a common way that we measure the darkness, and we put numbers from 1 up to 9. Where would you say that Grinnell or rural Iowa is? Probably a 3, right? But we want more scientific information. We want quantifiable measurements. And the sky quality meter is a nice little convenient, and I've got one, just a little thing that you point up at the sky and hold it for a couple seconds, and it gives you a number that tells you about how much light there is coming from the sky. It's a good way to measure it. And when I've done it multiple times in my observatory 5 miles east of town, I can get a Bortle sky of 3 on pretty good nights. And this is a picture that's on the front of the little scope or the meter that shows you the different numbers. So if I get in the 20s and going up to 21, I'm pretty happy. Another meter on the market's a black sky monitor. Does the same thing, and it costs about $90. Mine costs $140. As you may have guessed, yes, there's an app for everything, including the sky. And this sky app costs $1.99, and I ordered it, haven't used it yet, but I don't know if that's a month. I'm going to get hit every month for that or not. I guess I'll find out. Last year, thousands of amateurs got out and measured the sky with their meters all over the world. And their readings were sent in compiled by different places. And these are the dates that they did this in 2023. So that's kind of a neat way. You buy one of the meters and go out and then send in your data. Well, this is a map, shows the readings of the eastern United States. Isn't that kind of neat? Where the people went out and took their measurements. In the United States and Mexico, Canada, Puerto Rico, and all around the world compiling this data. So here's a way where amateurs can get involved in actually measuring the sky and giving some data. Well, one of the harmful effects of light pollution is termed sky glow. And as you can see, it's the dome of light, usually above a city, from accumulated light from street buildings, residential lighting, commercial. It can often be seen from many miles away. Doesn't just decrease what the human eye can see, but also has a major impact on nearby astronomical observatories. This is the sky glow from Phoenix. But taking this picture, you're looking toward Phoenix from Surprise, Arizona, which is 60 miles away. And you can, I don't know if you can see in the back or when you dark light, there's one star up in the little middle upper. That's Sirius, the dog star, the brightest. I don't know if any of you can see the constellation Orion up in the right upper corner, but this is 60 miles south of Phoenix. This is Calgary, Alberta. And this is a photograph of the sky above Calgary, Alberta, showing the moon, and in the right lower corner is Venus, which is brighter than any of the stars. And what's remarkable about this image, it's a stacked picture of 4 2-second exposures. So the point of that is it's catching more light, far more light than the human eye would, because we only download, I think, in 0.4 seconds of light. So this is showing more than our eyes would see above Calgary. 2 examples, looking at the Orion Nebula from a dark sky, and you can even see the Orion Nebula, and then from a light-polluted sky. This is a view looking toward Calgary from the Rothney Observatory in Prudhoe, Alberta, 12 miles away. So you can kind of see a glow off in the back. And this is a view from inside their dome. And you could see that, but look up in the left upper corner. You see that sky glow? That's from Calgary, 12 miles away. Now, as it says, the bright glow in the corner is caused by Calgary, but this is Calgary's 3rd largest telescope that's being interfered with this. And it was the last one that was protected with some dark sky ordinances that they did. Now, so sky glow created by urban lighting is poorly shielded. It has an effect on these telescopes' performances as if they're actually smaller than they are. And this means the significant value of the investments in research and teaching telescopes is eroded by this. So this isn't just theoretic. Let's take a tale of 2 observatories and light pollution. I don't know if any of you have been there. This is Mount Wilson Observatory. Mount Wilson installed its 60-inch telescope in 1908. And in the famous 100-inch Hooker telescope, at that time, in 1918, was the biggest telescope in the entire world. And it was placed on Mount Wilson, 10 miles northeast of Pasadena, which had some of the best and clearest skies in the United States at that time. The 2 most important discoveries in astronomy were made with that telescope, with the Hooker telescope. Almost exactly 100 years ago, Edwin Hubble used that telescope to prove that the Andromeda Nebula was not really a nebula, but was another galaxy. And we weren't the only galaxy in the universe because he proved that. The second discovery that he made with that telescope 5 years later, he got data and showed that there are many other galaxies out there, but they're all moving away from us, and they're moving away from us at different speeds. Hence, the expanding universe leading back to the theory of the Big Bang. So the 2 biggest breakthrough findings in astronomy were made with that telescope. Founded in 1958, Kitt Peak National Observatory, and I've been there, is home to one of the largest arrays of optical and radio telescopes in the world. It's located 54 miles southwest of Tucson, Arizona, at an altitude about 6,800 feet on the Tohono-O'odham Indian Nation territory. Well, that's interesting. The Indians have let us use that. Now, this is the real-world effect of sky glow. So look in the top part, and you can see that the sky glow is 1. It doesn't affect your telescopes. If it's 3, it cuts down what is the effective aperture of your telescope. And the higher sky glow, it cuts it down more and more. So the sky glow of 5, over 50%, it's reduced your telescope. Now, so I highlighted 2 observatories here. Let's take a look at Mount Wilson on the bottom, which has 2.5 meter, 100-inch, that's a big telescope. But its effective now with the sky glow is only 1.2 meters. Only a little twice as big as my telescope, or Bob's at the observatory. So that's the effective. Notice Kitt Peak, however, that its effective aperture for their biggest 4-meter telescope is only reduced to 3.89. Big difference on two major universities. Well, the problem is in LA, Mount Wilson isn't used anymore. It's obsolete. No astronomers are doing any observations from that because it's so horrible because of light pollution. And there was even a time when they were going to demolish the observatory. You can't move the telescope, it's too big. And fortunately, some volunteers and some donations, they've kept Mount Wilson open for visitors, but it's not doing any scientific work anymore, whereas Kitt Peak is. So, again, here's one of our major telescopes totally, because LA is not going to have a light pollution ordinance, which we'll find that Tucson ends up having. Light trespass and safety. We've talked about the combined and cumulative effect of Allen, but what about the reasons to light in the first place? Why do we want to put lights up? And is our present lighting accomplishing our goals? What's our goals? Why do we want to light up our backyard? Why do we want to light this or that up? And we have to ask this question, can it actually be making the situation worse? Why so much bad lighting? Education, lack of awareness, even in the lighting community. Builders, contractors, owners, operators, the public, government and staff, apathy and inertia. What's the purposes of lighting? I think most of us could come up with this list. Safety, security, navigation, decoration, advertising. We've been taught that bright lights equal safety, right? More lights you get, safer everything is. But we're going to find out that's not true. And secondly, the key is to be safe, not just to feel safe. So, I'm putting all these lights out there, that's going to make everything safer. Well, does it really? What about light trespass? Shining light where it's not wanted. Oh, take a look at this house. He's got a big light out there, and yeah, it's getting part of his property, but it's going next door on his neighbor's. And again, light on the side of his house, going over into everybody else's yard, but on the other side of his house, he's got it going just on his porch where he wants it. That's a good definition, picture, slide of light trespass. You see all the light, it isn't just where you want it. This is an example of a road. The street lights, yeah, they're supposed to be lighting the road, but look what they're lighting. The side of the building more than they are on the road. Any of you ever driven into a gas station that looks like this at night? And when your eyes get used to this, then when you drive out, it takes a little while for them to adjust back to the darker road. If you live in Utah State, you got this light right next to one of your dorms. If you're in this neighborhood, this residential, you got this light right outside your house. Gee, what are they trying to do there? Does that make you feel more comfortable and more secure? No, light pollution is also glare. And glare is an important concept of light pollution. It actually makes visibility and safety worse. Glare, directly viewing these bright sources of light at night will temporarily blind drivers or pedestrians. Unexpectedly, it contributes to accidents. We've all been there where there's something so bright and you almost want to put your hand up to block it. Glare from a walkway light. Is that making things safe? Your eyes can't adjust because of the glare you see. You're walking along that sidewalk. You can't see the subtle cracks in the sidewalk because your eyes are from this. So you trip on the sidewalk, because you can't see the little crack, which you would have seen if it was adequately lighted and you didn't have the glare. Some of you have been there and done that. What are we trying to do here with the lights in the city? Or vanity lighting, we call it. We just have a public building and say, well, let's just light it all night and just put all these lights on it to make it look cool at 3 in the morning. You know, like, well, excuse me? Or how much light do we need and does really help you see the road better? And I'll posit a lot of times, no, it doesn't. Add a little rain and this advertising sign becomes almost blinding. So you're driving down there and here's the side, but there's rain on this windshield and you have trouble seeing the median, or you're blinded by another car coming. Better lighting, yes, shielded by pointing down, but still a little too bright and too much glare. Doesn't more light, especially around our home, make us safer? Shouldn't we just put a bunch of spotlights around our house and then we'll really feel safe and secure? I'll put up a bunch of floodlights and illuminate our homes as much as possible, including my neighbor's home and the front walk and the sky, by the way. So key factors in effective outdoor lighting. Too much light can be unhelpful. Dark areas allow hiding, and that can cause other issues. But first, consider the following question. Does even good outdoor lighting, security lighting, actually do what it's intended to do? Well, I think, does it deter crime and burglary or somebody doing something damage to your property? Well, this is 2024, so let's ask AI if more lighting reduces crime. So go on your computers or your smartphones and ask AI. And gee, AI says, folks, it doesn't deter crime. And it can give you lots of the data. But the study back even in 2015 showed that they don't really prevent accidents or crime. Can you see the man on the top, in the top part of the slide over there? But look what happens if you cover the light up with your hand. See him coming out the door down there? You didn't see him with your light on. You didn't have a clue he was there. But when you cover it up, do that. Or, there's a garage. Yeah, okay, you got your lights up there. But when you cover it up, I got a little arrow, if you see it in the front. There's a guy standing over there right next to the garage. You don't see him with your regular lights on there. But if you don't have the glare, you can see him lighting. This is an interesting thing I found. What happened in Auckland, New Zealand. The population over 1.5 million when there was a 2-week power outage. Probably not from a derecho, but they were all worried because there was going to be all this crime in the city because there were no lights in the city and people were going to burglarize and they were going to be rape and murder and car theft and all that. But what they found out, it says, this director of safety for the whole community says, I couldn't believe it. There wasn't any crime. Crime went from this level, or this is the normal level, to Zippo. So, I mean, it's one point in one country and whatever, but the point that, do we have more crime here during the debate show? Don't think so. So, again, the myth that, oh, we need all this lighting for safety and security. So, what can we do? Keys to good quality lighting. See the effect, not the source. Shine the light down. Don't have glare. Put it only where you really need it and don't overlight. Use energy efficient. Well, I like talking about this topic because it's a win-win-win. So here's guy's got a badly aimed 500-watt halogen floodlight. But somebody talks somewhere who comes to this lecture and says, well, maybe I'll change that. I'll just put a 100-watt light and I'll aim it better. Well, that's good for everybody. It's good for the night sky. The guy's using a fifth less power. And his neighbor likes it a lot better. So what's not to like about making that change? So the fixture should be directed where you want the light to go. Pretty simple. You can put fixtures on the outside of your house if you want, but again, where the light wants, where you want it. If you got a garage, I've seen so many of these, they point up at the sky. You know, what's with that? However, well-applied illumination can be effective in some locations and against some forms of crime. So I'm not saying zero, take all the lights down. But to make outdoor lighting more effective, you can use the shielded fixtures, lights where needed, but think about using a motion sensor. Why leave a light on all night to see if there are any intruders that only would appear for a few seconds or minutes? Besides, if you're a prowler and you think, oh, I'm okay to go to this place, all of a sudden this light comes on, you don't know if somebody just turned it on from inside or not. Man, you skedaddle out of there, right? Or if your light's on all the time, you know the shadows, you know exactly what you're dealing with, what door or window to go into. Roadway lighting is the greatest source of light pollution and glare, light trespass, and energy waste. Waste tax dollars, and you can see on the left and on the right the difference. So let's briefly talk about street lights. Light trespass spill from unshielded 4,000K LED street lights, and we'll talk about that later. But see all the light you've got from there? But the Dark Sky Society, the IDA, has guidelines for municipal and home lights. And again, the goal is to get useful light, not the glare or the stray light or the upward. And you don't have to be an engineer to figure out that these different shielding options, the bad, better, best. You can come up with that. And if you're doing walkways, you want the light to be close to the ground doing the walkway. And the type of street lights really make a difference. There are low pressure sodium, metal halide, all these different kinds of lights, which we'll talk briefly about in a minute. But one of the just design changes is on these Cobra lights that you do the shine down or the cutoff so it doesn't go up, and you try not to have a lens that sticks way out that also bounces it up. And this was even designed in the state of New York in advance of legislation. So some cities and states, entire states have said, no, we're not going to do with these Cobra lights that go up, we're going to make them go down. And so, example of full cutoff and the old glare lights on the left. And I like this picture because this is Calgary, because they tried to cut down their light pollution. In the process of street lighting conversion in Calgary, they saved over $1.7 million every year. And here they've got half of their lights. You can see the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are the new lights. And then you see farther into the city, those are the old lights that they haven't replaced yet. So they're saving money in Calgary, big bucks, and you're having better driving experience, and the night sky is better, right? So they changed over 40,000 residential streetlights. They had fines for violations. They didn't just say, you got violations, don't worry about it. And they recommended these cutoffs. And they also said if you have timers, just put your timers on for 2 to 5 minutes. So, fixtures approved by the International Dark Sky, they're out there. We have this. Sarah, how much time do I have before break? Okay. So, the change to LEDs. However, there's been a major unforeseen consequence with the change of the type of light we use to the lower energy consuming LEDs. This is a picture of Calgary, aerial, in 2010, and I think 5 years later on the right. in 2015. You notice the difference? Look at the different color. I don't know about you, but it looks. What? One more color. Oop, one more back. Sorry. Does it look? To me, it looks a lot more yellower on the left, blue on the right. But so these bulbs are making pollution worse. Though energy efficient, it has a more negative effect on human, animals, and even sky glow. So we're going like, uh-oh. Pardon? Yeah, it does, but, and I'll show you. Good question. Now, all over the world, this is countries on the left, a number of countries in the world that show that it was all of a sudden a decrease, and then a decrease, and then it was stable, the third one over, and then there was a big increase in light pollution. And then it's kind of come down again, but it's still up. And it has to do with these blue LED lights. So some definitions. We also have to talk about the light spectrum, color, and temperature. And then we'll have a break. So, light lumens, that's what the source. You measure that, or candela. Luminance is what our eye actually sees. So LED stands for light emitting diodes. They're the most common type of globally as we see. They all contain blue wavelength, which we'll see. And the wattage is a measure of the electrical energy needed to produce the light. It's not a measure of the intensity of the light, which took me a long time to figure out also. So LED lamps require less energy. For example, the lumens, that's how much brightness, a 600 output requires 40 watts of energy for incandescent bulbs, the old ones we used to get. But only 10 watts of energy for the same amount of lumens in an LED lamp. Well, you go, wow, that's 5 times more efficient. Well, the problem if you go, well, I had a 100 watt bulb and give me a 100 watt LED. Well, nope, they're not equal, folks. In the old days, if you just went up the wattage, you got a better light. Now, the electromagnetic spectrum. And you see the whole spectrum of wavelengths, that just a little section there is the light spectrum that human eyes can see. Well, we've all noticed now when you go to buy a light bulb, you can't just look at the wattage. Now you got to look at the temperature or the K. You've been there, done that? And there's a big difference in bulbs. So this is called the color temperature scale. And you see the warm light, the kind of yellow glow, and you go up further to bright light, and then you go up to 7,000 K. It's like daylight and incandescent, and you can see on that continuum where the lights are, the temperature. So yeah, you have a choice to pick those lights, whether it's inside your house or whether it's outside, or whether you're street lights. And if you're street lights, you can pick different other types. You can pick sodium, high pressure, low pressure, halogen, cool white fluorescent daylight, metal halide, and look at the tip. So there's a big difference what you're going to do outside on what type of light that you put in your fixtures. Okay, here's an example. So here are 2 different appearance of humans looking at that. Now, on the left looks bluer, and on the right looks yellower. Well, there's the spectrum below it. So that kind of explains why it is. And not to get into too detail in this slide, but different types of lights. In the old-fashioned low-pressure sodium, look at where light, it just emitted light in that one little area. And as we come down to the high-pressure sodium and down to the bottom, the LEDs, you see that the spectrum of the light that we're getting is much wider. Likewise, among the LEDs you see the temperature differences. And so whatever temperature, as you go higher in the temperature, 5100 K, you see you're picking up a lot more of the blue, correct? Well, so here's the effect on sky glow. So low pressure sodium only has a factor of worsening it by 1. You go down to LED at 24, 4.4 times more sky glow. But if you use an LED bulb at 51 temperature, it's almost 8.1 times. So just with using LEDs, you can see that there's going to be a difference of which ones you use. And the relative sky glow from, again, high pressure sodium, low pressure sodium, which people aren't using anymore because they require lots more energy, and the variation on the LEDs. And here is high pressure sodium, lodium, and metal halide, which I don't know what they are. So this is a good time for a break. And what we're going to do in the second half is we're going to talk about the effects of light pollution on the ecosystem. Humans, animals, and plants, and us. So we'll see if there are other effects rather than just what's going on in the sky. Okay, so.
Okay, JR, I think we're all back gathered, and so let's get started and resume the second half here.
Okay, we'll get the lights. Sound check in the back, still okay? Cool. So what are the effects of light pollution and Alan on the ecosystem? For billions of years, all life has relied on Earth's predictable rhythm of day and night. It's encoded in the DNA of all plants and animals. Humans have radically disrupted the cycle by lighting up the night. Plants and animals depend on the Earth's daily cycle of light and dark to govern life-sustaining behaviors such as reproduction, nourishment, sleep, and protection from predators. Scientific evidence suggests that artificial light at night has negative and deadly effects on many creatures, including amphibians, birds, mammals, insects, and plants, and maybe even people. It affects it at different levels in ecosystems, communities, populations, individuals, and even genes. This is just a busy slide someone put together of different effects of pollution and light pollution on different parts of our ecosystem. So the harmful effects on wildlife, as you can see, can affect mammals, birds, insects, reptiles, and on amphibians. So let's start with birds. Can you imagine being a bird migrating from Canada to the Caribbean and trying to navigate over the eastern United States after that slide I showed you? Because you've learned and been taught to navigate with the stars and the moon. And all of a sudden you're flying over what we saw in the earlier slide. I did not realize the statistic was this high. 80% of North American bird species migrate at night, relying on the moon and the stars to navigate. So it's not just a few birds we're talking about. Also, the statistics are astounding to me. Big cities, brighter lights add up to over 1 billion bird collisions. 1 billion. Now, birds are affected by the artificial light at night. It can cause disorientation, cause circling, collisions, increased risk for colliding. And when it's fog or rainy, the birds fly at a lower level. They're not way up high, where they're going to get more trouble the lower that they fly. So floodlights, lighthouses, airport, all these things can affect birds. So this slide is very impressive because This is 1,000 birds, dead birds counted, after colliding with a McCormick place in Chicago. On one day, one building, one city. So multiply that by other birds' deaths. And those of you that don't know or haven't been there or seen that, this is McCormick Place. It's right on the lake. It's not a skyscraper, the Sears Tower. That's 2 stories. 1,000 birds. They went out and collect dead birds one night. Well, how does light impact bird collisions? Again, I learned this in doing the research. That's why I like doing these. The majority of collisions take place in the daytime. I did not know that. I thought it was at night. They're just flying into these at night. And they're drawn into these unsafe environments by the lights. They're flying over the lake and they see these lights and they head in there. And the amount of light emitted by the building is a stronger predictor than the height. So I thought, oh, it's just going to take off the skyscrapers, the high birds. McCormick Place isn't very high. So it's the amount of light that it does that. And so if you're a bird and you fly over a city, instead of keep migrating, you just kind of come over and say, well, I guess I'll circle around here and keep circling, and then I'll stop. Well, all that circling and stuff takes your energy, and pretty soon you can become exhausted. So this is an ornithologist with a dead bird. Well, ask the audience, ask you, what can we do about it? Anybody? What's the suggestions? Turn the lights off. What a brilliant suggestion. Well, this is Chicago skyline in May, way back in 2001, where they talked a dozen buildings and said, hey, why don't you guys just turn your lights out and we'll cut down some bird deaths. Well, they got 12 buildings and said, okay. I don't see which ones they did much on, but it did make a big difference. And we've got tons of data that's showing turning these lights off makes a huge amount. Scientists found on nights when half of the windows in a large building in Chicago were darkened, there were 11 times fewer bird collisions during spring migration and 6 times fewer during the autumn migration. That's just half of the lights in the building. I don't understand why people want to light the buildings up at night. Is all the money. I mean, nobody's there, to do that. So pretty simple. In 2021, scientists reported that dimming the lights just on McCormick Place that we talked about reduced bird collisions by 60%. They didn't say turning them off. They just said dimming them. So this does make a difference. Texas skyscrapers are going dark to keep billions of birds safe. And I put a little arrow up there, say this is April of 2024. So some people are getting this message. Skyscrapers, turn off. Well, around 24 communities in Texas have pledged to follow the lights out recommendations. So some other cities said, gee, we can do this too. And again, they go to their city councils and said, we're going to save all this money and we're going to save all these birds. I mean, like, oh no, let's leave them on and kill more birds and waste more money. I mean, I don't care where you're on the political spectrum, this is not, that would not be a good strategy. Now, we know bird migrations occurred at different times. So this is a graph showing the number of bird collisions during the year. And you can see, gee, where do you think the peaks are? Spring and fall migration. And back in 2022, they had a program called Dim the Lights for the Birds at Night. Nice rhyming. Where people all over the world were supposed to dim their lights during these certain times for the birds. The effects of Allen on insects. And why should we care? Who cares about insects? Well, the UK research found out there's a big decrease in insect populations. This is the UK. Well, we know in the United States, There's a big decrease and all over the world. And it's due to pesticides, habitat destruction, but also light pollution. And Bob Cadmus will like this scientific thing that they use. It's called a splatometer. So you too can probably order one of these and put it on your license plate, and it's got grids, and you put it on for a certain amount of time. And I don't know how you have to calculate your mileage you drive, or if you just leave it in your garage. But again, how many bugs are splattered on there? Well, I don't need a splatometer to notice on my windshield that I don't have near the bugs that I used to. In the old days, when you drove to Des Moines or came back at night, you had there aren't many. And you go, well, that's not bad. Yeah, it is bad. Artificial light at night also attracts bugs and insects. It's harmful to these creatures because it acts like a vacuum cleaner that they can't escape. And even one artificial light source can disrupt normal flight activity. They like birds, long-distance migrations, or even attract insects that don't normally move from their habitat. They want to stay in your garden, but you turn on your porch light, and they're just like a magnet. They go to your porch light. And they stay there for too long, they die from overheating. You know, they just see them go around like that. Now, also that can affect the life cycle of plants, because many of these insects are pollinators. And National Academy booklet said a third of the human food requires pollinators. And all you farmers know that. So you take a bunch of the pollinators out, it's not going to go well. Some moths and animals work at night, insects that we're not even aware of. I just think it's fascinating that the dung beetle there that catches excrement and rolls it around into its place uses the stars to navigate. Who would have thought that a dung beetle had anything to do? Well, you got light pollution, the dung beetle doesn't get its poop in the right place, I guess. Bats are known to eat about 3,000 insects a night. Well, so then you got bats not having much food, has an effect on the whole ecosystem. Everything is connected. So one food supply, one pollinator goes down, it has effect on others. Now, something else learned in presenting this talk. The moths, I thought, they just attract us to the light and they just circle around it. Normally, they are oriented toward the moon. So why do they do that? It affects their sense of vertical orientation, like their gyroscope. So when they fly, they want to fly in this plane. Not this way or this way or this way, in this plane. And how do they know what's up? Not gravity. I didn't know this, but it has to do with light of the sky and the moon. Well, all of a sudden you put on a light, and you're going to get these weird type things. Orbiting, which we all see. Stalling, where they just do that. And this other thing called inverting. They fly upside down. Why would an insect fly upside down? Because it's disoriented. You've knocked out its gyroscope. Well, things are not going to go well for it. So we think that this artificial light only traps passing insects, but it affects which way is up. Now, we find out that insects are attracted to light of different wavelengths. Oh, isn't that interesting? So this slide is really fun to look at because it shows what spectrum of the light that animals and plants and humans, our eyes are most sensitive to. So when you look on there, you see that the human eye, we're evolved to look in the green, a little in the green in between here. But look at our insect friends down here. They're down in the blue and even past the blue, in the ultraviolet. Fish are affected, turtles, other animals. So we just assume that other animals see what we are. So if you want to attract insect, making a difference on what temperature of light you use makes a difference. If it's bluer, you're going to attract more. than if you use more of a sodium light. Now, the other problem is the commercial meters, like I told you, that we use, they're measured for us. They're not measured for animals. And so we think, oh, well, what we're seeing is what the animals are seeing. But we're finding out that no, that is not true. And different LED lights may have different blue components, but they look to us the same. So if I put up two here, you say, oh, that looks about the same as that one. Well, no, if we do a spectrum, we find out, no, this has got a lot more blue. So using the lux meter, the sky quality meter, does not measure in the blue area very much. So animals with different sensitivities, the light that they see is different. So I think that's a pretty fascinating thing we found out with our research here lately. Now, we all know about hatchling turtles. And this turtle is going the wrong way. I hate to say it, he's crossing a highway down in Florida, but he's headed toward that light because that's what he's programmed to do after he hatches. And many of us know that sea turtles are timed to hatch when there's near or a full moon, so that they can follow the moonlight to get to the safety of the sea. Wildlife is hurt by light pollution. And it affects many, many, many more species. And I'm just going to go over a few. It affects amphibians, who can detect light 1,000 times dimmer than what we can. So this simple experiment, they said, well, what effect does it have on tadpoles or salamanders? And with light, and then with artificial light at night, and you light by your pond out behind your farm. And okay, well, gee, it can change the color of the tadpoles. And the wood frogs are smaller, and it changes the size of newts, and it changes predation. This is an experiment that they did at Case Western on frogs, and they found out that these frogs changed their behavior so they're more active at night because the lights are on, and they were 15% smaller at the end of the experiment, which I don't know how long it went. So here, you're changing the size of frogs by having lights on. Light pollution harms wildlife and ecosystems. Talk about mammals. I'm going to give you one example. What about the effects of ALAN on mammals? And we're going to talk about wallabies. And wallabies, like many animals, use the light cycle of when we should get pregnant and when we should have babies. All very important timing. So they did a project down there where they wanted to study the wallabies in light, because wallabies, a lot of them live close to humans, right? In cities and whatever. So let's measure, and now that we know there's a difference in lights, if we have this lights for these wallabies with this blue frequency and this with these lights, is there a difference? Doesn't make any difference. The wallabies didn't care. Well, it was very interesting that they found out that the shorter wavelength at night suppressed the nocturnal melatonin secretion in the wallabies. So the bluer light screwed up the wallabies more. So wallabies from light-polluted areas had significantly suppressed melatonin secretions and a month-long delay in the birth of their offspring. Month-long. That's pretty significant because the delay, they have them born when there's going to be the best food supply. So now you're having them born a month different. So when the babies aren't going to get as much food. So this is your light at night. Well, Australian government is pretty proactive. National light pollution guidelines for wildlife. They've got a national thing, including marine turtles, seabirds, migratory shorebirds. So they said, what can we do as a country to be more friendly to our seabirds or wildlife? And the recommendations are different, obviously, for the different animals. For wallabies, well, if you're going to run an enclosure, use lights that we say are actually the better for sky glow too. More of the yellower lights and less the blues. Can it affect sea life? Researchers find that a considerable amount of urban light reaches the sea floor. Be aware, most of the largest cities in the world are on the ocean. This is an aerial view of the coastal light around Great Britain in the North Sea. And you can see along the shoreline, oh, there's some blue, there's light there. Who would have thought? Well, look at the Persian Gulf. The Persian Gulf from sky, it's just really lit up differently. It's one of the highest light pollution places in the world. And different spectra, wavelength of light penetrate different lengths down into the water. Well, it makes a difference. So the red light gets filtered out, the blue can go deeper. 76% of the green and 70% of the blue light from LEDs that light up coastal cities. Now, a study from University of Plymouth has proven that the pollution reaches as deep as the sea floors. And this is the city of Plymouth in southwest England. And they studied this. And they also found out on all these oil rigs that they have out there, the offshore areas, that it makes a difference. It changes predation. What fish? Well, they got the light on. Well, they don't go to night and sleep like most fish do. When I had my aquariums and I turned off the lights, fish went to sleep. Turned the aquarium lights on, fish woke up. They're not stupid. They're not going to waste their time. It changes that. Any bass fishermen in here? Raise your hand. Good. Okay. Well, even if you're not, the bass bite differently depending on the phase of the moon. Isn't that interesting? So trophy bass, real sportsmen and anglers, they kind of know that, well, let's see, this might be, you can look at weather, but you want to factor in the moon. So it's complicated, all this from sky glow and so many things that affect natural. Well, let's talk about one more animal. All corals reproduce one way or another corresponding to the moonlight. If you knew that. And the moonlight intensity triggers this massive spawning of the sperm and the eggs in the oceans. It only happens once a year, annual event. Well, everything else is waiting for that to eat them, so it's not just the coral are spawning at that time. The urban lights can mask the moon phases, and the corals go, well, when do we release this? Can Allen affect plants? Answer is yes. Well, and I don't have time to go much into this, but it affects the insects that are on it, the herbivores, and it can affect the biology. That could be a lecture in itself. I'll just show you a couple pictures. This is a tree in autumn. Well, what's wrong with this picture? It's lost its leaves, but the ones that are close to the cobra light are still on. Because at night, it's obviously that part of the tree is getting screwed up because it doesn't think the days are shorter, does it? Well, do you think what happens if half of that tree gets frozen before the sap does? I don't know the biology of that, but it can have an effect on that tree. Here's another example. Lost all the leaves, but look at the one by the street light. Or the side of somebody's house. They got a light there, and gee, all these plants are still flowering here. Because they think, oh, wait a minute, flower in October? That's not going to go well. Does it affect humans? I always get this question. And the answer is yes. Particularly the blue light affects our circadian rhythms. Can have effect on cancer, obesity, neurodegeneration, sleep disorders? And the answer is yes. It disrupts our natural rhythms, or can. And it does it by suppressing melatonin. And it can increase the risk of obesity and cancers. And has mental health issues. So we're finding out now that light has effects on all the different parts of the body. Now, we have evolved a 24-hour circadian rhythm in our bodies as humans, and affects our metabolism, our temperature, sleep-wake, melatonin, and it's reset by sunlight. And exposure to bright lights at night can reset that biological clock in the brain. Though it's complicated, which we're not going to go into, but trust me, it can, because you can measure that. I did not know this either. It regulates 10% of all human genes. So now we're talking about artificial light messing with their genes, and not changing them genetically, but they're turning them on and off in our body temperature, hormone production. And at the bottom, immune adjunct. That's our ability to fight disease. So this is just an example of Big Nurse's study in 2016. 14% increase of breast cancer. Women who were at the highest exposure to Allen and the lowest exposure, in comparing them, and there was a significant difference. And so did the breast cancer rate. Is there a link between Alzheimer's? Research shows there's an association, underline that word, didn't say cause, an association in the U.S. between Alzheimer's disease and the prevalence and exposure to light at night. And I found this interesting, particularly in those under the age of 65, so I guess we don't have to worry about it. Well, but association is not cause and effect. So how could artificial light produce these findings, and what could be the mechanism? Well, the answer is decreased melatonin secretion, because melatonin is produced only at night. Bright light suppress it, blue light suppresses it more, and it hinders immune blockers. And this is just more about melatonin, but when it's changed, it affects mood and depression. Isn't that interesting? Reproductive physiology. And they've done some studies that melatonin inhibits breast cancer in rats. Well, that's rats, but the fact that it's changing in rats slows human breast cancer cells in culture. Isn't that interesting? It has an effect on prostate cancer. And the melatonin is suppressed mainly by blue light. Well, from the Harvard medical letter, blue light has a dark side. So somebody's using their smartphone at night, they're getting blue light. Well, how does that use your cell phone? Well, we study this now. It affects memory, makes it harder to learn in the daytime. Neurotoxins, depression, obesity, and the immune system. So this is the mechanism. Okay, changing gears to satellites. I had to bring this, and it's a real problem. Gee, look at that image of the stars. Or that one. All those trails are satellites going across the picture that we're taking. That's the Pleiades there. You can see them, but you got all these star trails. Oh, there's the Pleiades. Yeah, I can. 7 sisters right down in there, but see all these stars from, these happen to be from the Starlink satellites. And there's some more. Article in the BBC Sky at Night. Here, you see the sky rotating at the time exposure, but then you see those satellite trails coming across. And another one over Carson National Forest in New Mexico. So you got some nice dark skies out in New Mexico, but that doesn't help. You got all these satellites going over. Half of all satellites are now from SpaceX. Here's why that may be a problem. Well, this is a nice slide that shows you every one of those dots is a satellite, folks. And I don't know if you've seen the back, but some are inactive, but look at all of those. And this is a closer view. This is a program I downloaded for free, and you put this on, and it shows all of them moving. You can see where they are. And you see this ring around close to the Earth, and that is called low Earth orbit. That's where a lot of these satellites are. Now, that's not counting all the space junk that's out there floating through space. Oh, rocket boosters, defunct satellites, etc. So it's an overcrowded sky. And Starlink says, oh, we're going to put another 42,000 up there in low Earth orbit. And that's not counting what China is going to do. They want to put a constellation of 13,000. Now, it's just the beginning. There could be over 100,000 satellites roaming around that Earth's orbit. So imagine what it does to visual astronomy. But what about radio astronomy? You don't use light, you use radio waves. There are very significant impacts on those satellites, not just on visual astronomy, but also on radio astronomy. Radio telescopes are looking at very distant sources and other galaxies, and these satellites their radiation is different. So, example says the Starlink frequency, they said, okay, Musk, you and your satellites, you can broadcast back to Earth, use this wavelength. So all your satellites use that. Well, they found out that out of a bunch of satellites that they had, 47 of them were found to be leaking at this other frequency. Well, wait a minute, what's that other frequency? Well, the other frequency, they're supposed to be in the middle, but this passband, that's the one that's reserved for astronomers, radio astronomy all over the world. So these satellites, some of them are interfering with the radio telescopes. So this is way back out in the in the outback of Western Australia, and they're finding, wait, there's radiation from these satellites. We're trying to image galaxies billions of miles away, and this satellite radiation is causing a problem. Worst nightmare, Elon Musk's Starlink satellites could blind radio telescopes. The second generation of satellites that he's doing emit 30 times more stray radio waves than the first generation. So this next generation, well, so what they did is said, scientists got together with Musk and his SpaceX and said, let's help us, and are you interested in we need you to do this? But they didn't, okay, like screw you, we're doing what we want. Well, those of us who are scientists are pretty mad, because here he could make them so that they would not cause that to happen. So what can you do to address it? I hope I've convinced you it's a much bigger problem than you thought. What can you do personally? What can states do legislatively? What can local communities and cities do to ameliorate the problem? And what can organizations like the Dark Sky organization do? So the whole reason of this talk is expand awareness of the problem through education is the key. It's a win-win-win. So, easy. Summary, put the light where you want it. Use energy-efficient bulbs, only as bright as you need them. Shield them down. Have timers on. Choose warm bulbs. And join the International Dark Sky Association, which I'll mention in a second. So this brochure, if anybody wants it after, it's just from the International Dark Sky Society. So this is a worldwide problem. There's people all over the world are uniting to try to help that. So the goal is preserve and restore the night environment. In membership is well over 10,000 people now. So again, summary of different things you can do. And the street lights. And the walkways, and painting surfaces and walls, not reflective white, and use the bulbs that are cooler. It can also be shown that Allen drives climate change. Oh, that's another benefit. So if you're making climate change worse, it would be nice to be able to help that. And in the United States, it's estimated you could save 15.4 billion years $1 billion. These are states that have made, in cities that have made, said, no, just use this 3000K or lower bulbs. So some progressive cities, United States and Canada, have said, no, let's just do this. New York State Assembly has passed it. And their law, minimums. At this point, that picture of the Earth, 99% of outdoor light is wasted. 99%. So imagine if you just turned the rheostat down on all that light you saw from satellite, turned it down from 99 to 1. You'd still get all the things you need, but without that. Flagstaff, Arizona became the first international dark sky place in 2001. And it had the first lighting ordinance in 1958. Now, Tucson's light dome greatly affected the many neighboring telescopes and observatories at Kitt Peak. Okay, so they had a reason. We don't want to screw up Kitt Peak. So Tucson was pretty progressive. But here's Nantucket lights. They don't have any big observatories that I'm aware of around Nantucket. Light trespass. Be a good neighbor. So Nantucket has a code. Well, when I built my observatory in 2020, and a year later, Monsanto said, we're building the biggest seed plant in the United States or in the world a mile from you, I panicked. I thought, I'm screwed. Well, I tried to be proactive, called up, ended up talking to engineers that were developing it and said, hey guys, I know you're going to put lights all over the place, but just make them light down, please. It's going to be good for the environment, for me, for birds, and you'll save money. You don't need to waste money lighting the sky. Well, I was pleasantly surprised that these are the lights they didn't put in, mainly lower floating light diets. So they did. So I'm happy. So my observatory with the northern lights in the background is still protecting. Well, Professor of Astronomy, Bob Cadmus, who's sitting there, and I worked to try to get a dark sky ordinance passed in Grinnell in 2006 and 7. And we based it on Ames. We didn't have to reinvent the wheel. They had a pretty good one. And we got it passed by our city council. And it's been in effect since that time. And so you notice now when they change the lights, the downtown lights are kind of, they're going down instead of up. Some of the new street lighting on 146, at least it's going down. I mean, sometimes there's a problem with the globe too, but basically we're going in the right direction. Lights at the college many of the new ones are shielded, but there's still a number of old acorn lights, we call them, that still if you go over and look at them, which you can because they got, and then you look at the other side of the road and you see and you go like, wow, there's a difference. So hopefully we can get them to change over. Cobra lights, still some of these around, the big ones. Gee, this happens to be on 9th and Broad. Isn't that pretty light? Lights the whole thing. Well, talk about light trespass. This is a picture from our bedroom window. Because that light, from that light is up high, it's just coming right in and lighting up all of our bedroom, as everybody else on that whole corner. So working with Russ in the city, say, look, let's replace those with the other historic lights. Now, has the ordinance made a difference? The answer is yes, both lighting-wise and architecturally. I mean, which lights do you like better, the big glary ones or the other better? Well, Bob Cadmus has been very astutely monitoring this, and this is a graph from 2006 to 2024, and when we're done in a minute or so, I'll let you ask him questions, but he's plotted this from the observatory with the sky meter. And dots with snow covering the winter is different than it is if you just have bare ground. And he marked when they were doing athletic facilities construction, a lot of light, and then it got better, and then it started to go up a little bit, but it looks like it might be leveling off. What I circled in the right lower corner there, and those of you know, Gee, citywide power outage. What happened then? The ratio. So this is our control, folks. This is what the light level would be if we didn't have any Allen at all. Still not zero. So again, I thought that's a great, there was another power outage, but probably wasn't as extensive as this. So Bob can answer more questions about that in a minute. So what more can be done locally? What can the city do? Bob and I met yesterday with Russ and Tyler and talked about where are other areas in town that maybe could be changed or improved or whatever. What can the city do? What can individuals do? We already talked about this. Timing, direction, type of lights that you use. And for bird migration, certain times of the year. Yeah, are they skyscrapers in Grinnell, but they're things, you might want to do migration season. Turn off your floodlights, so the birds can just keep going, particularly if it's cloudy or bad. And don't use your smartphones at night before you go to bed, up to a half hour or so before, or other screens. In concluding, I'll also mention that we all have a spiritual relationship with the heavens, whether or not we recognize it or not. Our relationship with the stars in the night sky has been spiritual and literally shaped cultures and civilizations. If you're even the least bit interested in man's relationship with the heavens over time, I can highly recommend the book The Human Cosmos by Jo Marchant, where she describes our relationship with the heavens over time. And finally, become aware of the tremendous power that connecting with the night sky has with our very well-being. And I saw this on the Dark Sky website. Zen in the Stars. This astronomer, he's also a Zen Buddhist and teacher, and how connecting with the night sky and nature is actually good for our well-being. And in conclusion, let's all work together to preserve the night sky, not just for astronomers, professional, amateur, but for the plants, the birds, the other animals, and especially for our future generations. Because if we don't learn to do it, they're going to have any night sky to protect. So thank you for your time and attention, and we'll get questions from Sarah.
Okay, given the time, I think we just have time for one question, but I have a favor to ask.
Yes.
Would you be willing to send the slides to me?
Yes.
So I could send them out to everyone, because there's a lot of great information in there.
Yep.
And I'd love to take the time to read through those a little bit more. So if you wouldn't mind sending me, but we'll take Monty's question.
I was just curious. Does changing from daylight to standard time back and forth, does that have a positive or negative effect on any of that?
Can you repeat the question, JR?
Monty asked if changing from daylight savings time, which we're going to do pretty soon, back and forth screws stuff up. It's been shown to screw humans up. There's more heart attacks and more problems. Well, seriously, medical things when that happens. I can't remember which way it is, but it does make a difference. Whether it has an effect on the environment or the birds or whatever, I don't know. Bob, do you know anything about that? Yeah, they're not daylight saving times or wherever. Yeah, migration. So, but it does affect human, illness, and so that's, I guess, people get stressed out when they're not doing that.
That's true. Well, thank you. Thank
and
you,
Bob's
JR,
going to be here
so
for
much.
answer questions too about
Bob, that's true.
his nice slide on the light stuff. So
Yes, thank you.
well, thank you.
Thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome.
A reminder, next week we actually will not have the bucket courses because this next Tuesday, this space will be a space where the election will take place, and our county auditor asked for one more day. I mean, I don't know, she doesn't have a lot to do on Tuesday. I don't know why she needs one more day on Wednesday, but she has asked if we could please pause and not have this space because they have things they need to clean up from the election the day before. So we will not have bucket course next week, but please vote by next Tuesday or on next Tuesday. And then in November itself, we'll only have 2 bucket courses. Then on the 13th and the 20th, I'll email that information out to you as to who are on those dates, but at least mark those on your calendar, the 13th and the 20th, and then vote, please, in this next week. And it's so great to see everyone. Have a great week. Please put the chairs back, and please thanks JR one more time for me. Thank you.